On tonight's Cover One Buffalo podcast, we are joined by A to Z Sports' Destin Adams. But first, our guys at Handsome Jack.
Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia worldwide with Greg Tompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL. Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, along with my partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron, I feel like I'm in like Eric's neck of the woods. You have connections to Montreal. I'm traveling around the globe.
Did you get any bagels yet while you were? Did you get a bagel in Montreal?
No, I've had some really good French food. I went
That's
to
good.
one of those like dinners where it's a cooking class where you break up into groups and there's like a cocktail group and then like an entree group and then a wine tasting group. And it was a fantastic evening, and I'm glad I'm here with you now.
And so Greg's drunk tonight, just for anything that he says can't be held against him entirely. Is that what I'm getting out of you?
I have legal representation. William Mattar, if I say anything inappropriate, you're going to need to speak to my legal representation.
I don't think
William
that's
Mattar.
the law he does.
Can he not help me?
Yeah.
With that? No, tonight's honestly, it's been awesome. This is an international city. I met lots of cool people. Got connected. Like the number one Buffalo Bills fan in all of Poland, Matthias. Shout out to Matthias. Really cool people all over the place. Sadly, I had dinner with a Chiefs fan from Montreal, so that was a little more difficult. But
Sure.
I'm ready. I'm ready for the show tonight.
Yeah, I know that we are probably behind most content creators when it comes to jumping into the draft season. I think I got a little bit of a head start on you this year. But this is a great time to bring in people that do a little bit more work than we do ahead of where we are, and start to chat with them.
Yeah, so without further ado, our guy from A to Z Sports, Destin Adams. You guys know him from covering the Colts, covering the draft, all around the world. I got to enjoy some time with him in Indianapolis at the Combine. Destin, how we doing?
Doing good. Indy's a little crazy tonight. Tornado sirens 30 minutes west of me, but we're battling through it here in Indiana.
Good. Stay safe. So if we lose you, I hope you're okay. I hope you're okay. But hopefully things stay okay there. We've got a lot of fun coming up in the NBA playoffs. We'll have some fun Pacers Cavs tweets to send each other here in a couple weeks. But how are things going as we get into now? You know, you're somebody who dives in, neck deep into draft work. You're working double duty all fall, studying the guys in the draft coming up as you're also covering the Colts. I think that there are some pockets of this draft that we've talked about that have some real strengths. And, we talked pre-show about, where Aaron and I think some of the Bills draft needs are. It seems like it's not a bad year for some of the pockets where the Bills need some things. Where are some positions that you've seen the draft where this might not be bad time to need a spot at some of those positions?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason that you hear everybody talk about how weak of a draft this is at the top is because of the positions that the strengths are in, being non-premium spots. If you need a running back because, you have a running back that's, demanding to get paid crazy money with the last name Cook in the near future.
Yeah.
Could be a good year.
Allegedly just put his house up for sale. Like Channel 4 News just reported that James Cook put his house up for sale for Buffalo. That's weird.
Good time to trade houses is what I hear. But good time to just trade them out. But running back's a really good year to need a running back. Really good year for a defensive tackle and pretty much just about any kind of defensive tackle you want. If you want the 1 tech, the 3 tech, the 5 tech, if you want an edge rusher that can slide inside and play on the interior, there's a lot of those options in this class. And then I think the secondary is sneaky deep. I'm not going to call it deep, but I really think when you're getting in from that first round, that twinge between day 2, I really think there's some really good options where you could probably get a starting a starter in the secondary in the 3rd and 4th round this year. Those are the spots that really pop off on tape. And the reason that it's getting disliked is because you don't have the sexy receivers in this class. The quarterback class after the top 2 is questionable, to say the best. When the tight ends are outshadowing most of the receivers, you know right away that this class is probably not going to be well liked by a lot of fans.
Real fast before we get into actual Bill stuff, I didn't even tell you this to prep you. Where are you on Shedeur Sanders? Is he a guy that you think teams will eventually talk themselves into the fact that, well, I guess he's the second best quarterback, so we got to take him second overall? Or do you think we might see a sneaky slide on draft day?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the slide looks like. I think there are enough quarterback needy teams in the league right now that his just natural ability in terms of being accurate at all 3 phases, I think that matters. And I think there's going to be enough teams where I don't think the drop will be significant. I'd be shocked if he got out of the top 10, for example. So I don't think we're going to have a Johnny Manziel camera panning to Shedeur and Dion all night long or anything. I don't think we're going to have that. But I think it's possible we see him fall out of the top 3, which will cause some people to start tweeting that he's dropping.
It would be a real shame if it ruined things for the Patriots and Hunter and Carter went 2 and 3. That would be a real shame. No one would want to see that.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a possibility. I have a 2-round mock coming out this week, in fact, and I have Carter and Hunter both off the board by the time the Patriots pick. So those late season wins aren't always what they feel like in the moment.
Yeah. Joe Milton.
Sort of opposite of player sliding. One thing, the Bills obviously are picking at 30, and they've been kind of hanging out in this range in past drafts. And whenever there's a target of a position that we like, last year with wide receiver, right, in the past with cornerback, trying to get one of those guys, I get nervous when you get into that 20s range of what is the position group that's going to kind of run here in the 20s, because there always seems to be one where it's like, yeah, there's a lot of talent here, especially on the top end. I agree that some of these positions the Bills are seeking are deep, but you do have a top end of these classes, and then you kind of have more depth players or project type players that aren't going to come in and demand a lot of reps. And so the Bills really want one of these guys to fall to him. What is the position in your mind right now as you're running through mocks in that late first round that you could see really being one of those ones where maybe the Bills have to get in conversations to trade up to get the guy that they're targeting at the top of that? Or, it will push down a defensive tackle or a corner to them because another position runs. What's that position that you think is going to kind of run in that, late teens, 20s?
Yeah. So one thing actually that a few different scouts that I've grown relationships have given me advice on when I've been doing my own scouting and developing like my own mock drafts is to pinpoint what those positions are where they just scream run on players. So for me, the 3 positions that I've circled that I think any of these 3 could end up being it. I think receiver is a big one to watch because the drop off after those top 4 is pretty significant around the league to where if one of those guys go, they're going to start to get worried that the second round's not going to be very fruitful for receivers. So receiver is one to watch. I think edge is one this year that's going to be one to watch because after Carter goes, it's a very questionable market to see where that next guy goes.
Yeah.
And once that next guy goes, who is edge 2, I don't think the difference between edge 3, 4, 5, and 6 are that big to where if you have an edge need, you're going to want to make sure you have one of those guys. So once edge 2 goes off the board, I would not be shocked to see some guys go. And the last one that I've circled a lot for, at least for the first round, is the tackle/guard. A lot of guys that are tweeners in this class. So it really depends on what you guys consider the necessary arm length for a tackle, for example. But I think that those are the big ones to watch there, that once the run happens, it could be significant. And if you don't need those positions, you want to see.
I'd love for those runs to all just clump together for me.
Yeah. All 3 of those, let them all stack together would be delightful.
Just 12 picks straight.
It makes sense a little bit too with the 5th-year option, right? On some of those premium wide receiver edge, where maybe he isn't a guy that is a first-round talent. You have him as a second-round grade, but you get that 5th year to see if they develop and kind of lock in that premium cost.
Greg Rousseau is a perfect example where we ended up getting that extra year at 13 million versus needing to pay him 20. That extra year really cushions it and gives you that protection to be able to do it. So let's kind of run through a couple scenarios here. So we'll do it in two directions. Again, I think that there are some cases, I think it's debatable the order of 3, 4, and 5. Some people think wide receiver, edge, safety. There's a couple different positions there, but I think most Bills fans have defensive tackle and corner kind of in their own tier here. So let's do two scenarios here. We'll run through who are some names. You can pick which one you want to start with. Who are some names that if they want to go with one of those positions at 30, here are a couple names to watch for. And if they do that, here's a group to look for when they have two second rounders here at 56 and 62 that they would pivot to at the other spot. Then we'll flip it and look for some others and see if we can build a couple combos that sound intriguing of, hey, you could get this guy and that guy, or then that guy and this guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think defensive tackle and corner are both interesting. I'll start with defensive tackle. I think the only for sure guy that's not going to be on the board for you guys is Mason Graham, right? You take him off the board, he's gone. I think there's a world where any of the other guys from just about that top 5 to 6 guys after that could be any team's DT2. It's very close, kind of like I said about some other positions. Some guys that kind of pop off that would be really solid fits next to Oliver on the inside, especially with you guys adding Bosa as an edge. Walter Nolan and his ability as a pass rusher on the interior. There's some character stuff there, so it's all about if a team feels comfortable doing it. But if you feel comfortable about the character and you feel comfortable about the kid when you've done your meetings with him, very good talent, was really dominant at the Senior Bowl, and I think that mattered.
Real quick,
yeah,
he was one that not to the degree of Mason Graham where I knew for sure, like I think he's like everybody's chalk 5th pick to Jacksonville, it seems like, that I had kind of chalked up Nolan as like, all right, well, I'm not even going to worry about him. And I know I was listening to, I think it was Field Yates was on Mina's pod, and he had him like 11th, and I was like, all right. But then I was listening to Nate Tyson, Charles Robinson, and they had him like 41 and 45, and I was like, oh, well, all right, maybe I do need to do some work on Walter Nolan. I guess maybe it is possible.
Yeah, he's going to end up an Eagle and dominate everybody.
Oh my God, I hate you for saying that.
I mean, anytime the red flag you see as character concerns, it's just so hard to predict like which teams are going to be willing to do it. We're not in those meetings. We're not getting to hear what Walter Nolan is, where he's at mentally, obviously. But if you do feel comfortable with it after meeting with him, I think the talent is there. Like he's like the
strongest on the interior, just in terms of just old man strength,
just throwing dudes around.
No, yeah, he was on. There was a couple reps at the Senior Bowl where I bet some agents of some offensive linemen were ready for Walter Nolan to take the pads and go home a little bit. He was embarrassing some dudes out there, but there's a world where he's not there. Just depends on the character stuff again. Derek Harmon out of Oregon, really big body. If I was getting a guy next to Oliver, I think I'd want somebody with a little bit more juice personally than Harmon. But I think Harmon's a really good player, and a guy that I don't feel like anyone's ever going to say, darn, I got a really good player, even if he isn't exactly what I would go for. There's some people that think Darius Alexander could slide into the first round. He's another guy that he's from Indiana, obviously, so have been watching his game for a little bit. From Toledo, but I think Darius Alexander, again, another guy that showed at the Senior Bowl just how much juice he has and how big he is.
I think he's got some weight he can put on that frame still too. And watching him, do you think if he didn't play in the MAC, because like the film that I watched of him was absolutely dominant of the MAC, like exactly what you expect an NFL caliber player to do in the MAC, dominating double teams, taking them on, just total game wrecker. Do you think that his draft stock's lower because of the MAC? Or like, I feel like this guy should be up in this conversation with the other guys, and every consensus and every mock draft I see, he's more kind of in that second tier, second round. But the player I see on film screams first rounder to me, like at least late first rounder, which is probably a second round talent.
Yeah, I mean, I think the MAC is a part of it, but I mean, we saw Quinn Mitchell make a very seamless transition to the NFL from that same school, having potentially 2 first-round picks out of Toledo in back-to-back years on the defensive side of the ball. It's unreal, and I feel very bad for the rest of the MAC that had to play for them the last 2 years. But I do think it's going to be a big one. Is just how comfortable you feel about the tape with who he was playing, not having the full level of testing from the combine could be a concern for a group of 5 guy, just because that's just how some teams work. So that could also push him down a little bit. But I mean, I'm with you. I think the tape is good enough, and I think the class has enough concerns that definitely could be in play. And my lights are kind of flickering already. I don't know if you guys have seen that the last couple of seconds.
I was hoping we didn't lose you.
I'm still here right now. You might lose me soon,
right.
but I'm here.
So one name you didn't bring up. How about Kenneth Grant?
So I like Kenneth Graham, bigger guy. I like Kenneth Graham, big Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham is Mason Graham. But yeah, Kenneth Grant, big fan, especially if you're wanting that run stopper. He's going to be one of the most trustworthy guys you can have in that area. I think the big thing with him is I would just want more juice next to Oliver if I was the Bills. And I mean, similar to what I said about Harmon earlier, though, like I don't think anyone's going to complain that they have a guy like Grant who does what he can.
Oh no,
we might have actually lost us in that time.
Yeah, we'll see if he comes back here. If he comes back too, I want to pick his brain on. I know he was sort of wrapping up that first round. Tyleik Williams is another one that, like, I know he's talking about more juice in players, and Tyleik doesn't really have that type of juice, but just that size of being able to take
maybe
on
the most stout run defender besides Mason Graham. Like I think that Tyleik Williams is by many people's opinion the best run defender out of that group. So it's going to be interesting to see where those combinations come in, and being able to have those groups there. I'm really sad because I wanted to ask Destin, being an Indiana guy, a guy that I don't really understand why he's in like a secondary tier is CJ West. Like I don't know enough about that position and the scouting and like everything I see. He seems like he should be in that same sphere as those guys. He moves around like crazy for a guy who I think he weighed in at like 319 at the combine and had pretty good advanced metrics in the overall pass rush and run stops. And if he's a guy that we can get later on, heck, I see some people with him as like a late 3rd or early 4th round pick. If you could snag him later, if that, say it does, run the way that we're about to flip with Destin and go the other way, and they get a Trey Amos or one of the other guys here at cornerback, and then you end up with a Farmer or a CJ West later on, that would be really intriguing to me as well. Like I think there's a lot of combinations where you can walk away and still feel really good about what the Bills put together.
I haven't watched West. He is on my list here for upcoming.
I'm interested to see what you see.
Spent a couple days watching corners here and got away from the meaty dudes. But for me, whether it's a West or a Farmer, Joshua Farmer, or I also like some guys like a Norman Lott.
Yes.
Different types of players.
Real quick, Omar Norman Lott is like the metrics darling of that group, because any of the advanced pass rush metrics, he's the only guy that is like above Derek Harmon. So Derek Harmon obviously led in all the like pass rush win rate and in the overall pressure, sacks and quarterback hits. But the guy who pushes him in all of those is Omar Norman Lott, and having him as a possibility and being able to go through again. That's what I use when I go through this. I kind of flip those metrics, pick out the guys who kind of stand out, and then I go watch them to see like, hey, why isn't he being talked about in this same area as these other guys? So CJ West and Norman Lott are the guys who have really popped for me from that standpoint of standing out from a numbers that I want to go dig in and find out like, hey, why aren't they in the same discussion as these other guys?
Yeah, I think for Norman Lott, size plays into fact. He's to me looks more like a Ed Oliver type, which that again, this is the thing for me in this draft class is whatever, if it's the first round, second round, I want to double dip at the very least. And I know people have pushed back on me, like a couple of the mocks that I've thrown out, I've even taken 3 interior defensive linemen. They're like, we can't roster all these guys. And I was like, that's the kind of problems that I'm looking to have after what I saw last year. Like I think you can move on from Daquan Jones if you hit in the first round, you have a guy that you're solid with. I think you can honestly, like, Dwayne Carter hasn't earned anything in terms of like a job on this team. Yeah, you don't want to move on from a guy like that, but he did not play well. If I can replace that early on, there's guys on this roster that you can replace on the interior. There's late.
You also have that cushion of the 6 weeks with Ogunjobi where, you know, it's not crazy to be like, hey, maybe somebody gets hurt in those first 6 weeks that we need to short-term IR, and we're going to have the roster space to be able to play around with things back and forth. That's not crazy that it could be in that kind of position.
Yeah, and the suspensions definitely also play into it. But in terms of that first round area, I actually think the more I've gotten into Harmon, I've been low on Harmon. Eric kind of talked me out of it. I went back and looked a little bit. I see what he's saying. I think guys like Grant and Harmon could be in that type of run. I know that, you know, he was talking about wide receivers and some other positions running. I do think there's a chance this defensive tackle class runs a little bit just in terms of, I think it's these guys at the top. It's Graham obviously is the top one. And then Grant, Harmon, and Nolan are kind of bunched up to me in like in that area of like, I think everyone thinks they're going to fall into that Bills range, but I can see teams kind of getting on them. We see this going around the league. Run defense matters, right? Interior pressure matters. These positions, the good teams have interior pressure. The good teams have game-changing players at this position. So that's my concern is like those guys that everybody's like, oh, we got to walk away with a Grant or a Harmon. I don't know that that's going to be available to you at 30. So I'm trying to talk myself into, is Darius Alexander a pick number 30 pick, or is that a reach? Is Tyleik Williams also that guy? Kind of looking at an Alfred Collins, like looking at some of these guys that are in that next tier and feeling how much of a reach is this versus whatever corner could possibly be available. Because I think one thing that we should remind people, Greg, and I know you and I talk about this all the time, when you're picking at 30, like the first round talent, when I've talked to scouts and when I've talked to people, like any given year,
short of some super lucky drop,
12 to 15 guys are actually graded as first round talents year in and year out in the draft. When you're picking in 30, you're really in that second round range anyway. And so like, I don't mind if dudes on Twitter think Darius Alexander would be a reach at that, or Trey Amos would be a reach. We need a need, and these guys I think can come in and contribute right away.
Yeah, and we see it all the time of guys who fall into that next tier and end up being really, really good. And I think that combo Daryl here talking about Caldwell,
I love that. Yeah.
He's the perfect kind of guy that if you went with an Alexander early on, or you went with, you know, if you ended up with a Norman Lott and a Caldwell, that's the kind of combo that you could make work there, that you get a backup for Ed Oliver and a guy to pair with Daquan Jones. They could be both of those spots. I think there's a lot of possibility to do that. Alfred Collins is another big body that you could be able to work into one of those combinations. And I do want one of them to be the large human. Like, I'm okay if one of them is more of the explosive, penetrating, disruptive guy. That's cool. But I want a Tyleik Williams. I would love a Kenneth Grant, an Alfred Collins, just one of these guys who's
JJ Pegas.
Yes, absolutely. Pegas is a super interesting one. Dude, he scored 7 rushing touchdowns. Yeah. That's absurd.
That Ole Miss defense is kind of crazy.
I will say, I mean, obviously you have Pegas, you have Nolan, you have Amos, and I was like, oh, that's good. And you go and look, there's also a reason they gave up like 50 points less than any other defense in the entire SEC. They had by far the number one defense in the SEC by a lot. Well, yeah, no crap. They have a bunch of like first round picks
couple
and day 2
really good players transferred too, didn't they?
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah. I mean, you know, it's a whole thing with their coaching staff. But so why don't we go through what are some of the names of the guys that you went through in your work on corners so far that have intrigued you? Obviously, I know you could talk about one that's on everybody's radar with Trey Amos. Who are some? I know, you know, Jahdae Barron, I don't think is a guy we need to spend a lot of time on or worry about. That would be a incredible. That would be a guy that, hey,
That's a trade
somehow
up to me.
fallen to 20, and we now need to make a leap up because that's as far as he's possibly going to fall. So if you want to talk about any of the higher end guys, same thing with Will Johnson. Like, I don't think that's going to be a thing that we need to worry about. But who are some of the guys that intrigued you that you think might be there around our pick or maybe even in day 2?
I got kind of killed for taking him, and the people didn't think he would be there late. But I don't get to make the boards on whatever simulator I made. But I do think he won't make it past the first, early second. Is Maxwell Hairston? I really liked a lot. Tackling's not there, but I do see the vision. I don't know that he's a McDermott type of guy with that tackling, but he's a very good corner. The Siobhan Revel is the one that fans seem to really love. To me, though, the concern there is I think it's still a redshirt year. I know his doctor said that he'll be good to go. Doctors always say players will be good to go.
Hey, agents can always find a doctor to say that he'll be good to go.
Yeah, and like there's part of me that thinks you can redshirt a guy, but like I really would love a guy to come in and step in with Christian Benford on this defense, and I think you can get that in these first couple of rounds. Don't necessarily have to be a stud, but those are the guys I'm looking for. I'm gonna butcher his first name, but Azariah Thomas is a guy that I watched this week, and I wrote to Eric while I was watching him instantly. Very busy. Like, one, nobody even throws at this guy. The tape is actually quite boring because there's just not a lot of action on his side of the field. But he's a good tackler. He's really good in coverage. He can get up and press, can do a lot of things. And then obviously Trey Amos is right there. You talked about offline a little bit, like taking a waiver on a Benjamin Morrison because that's a higher end talent. Like I do like the tape, but again, I'm nervous to take hey, we're going to kind of let this guy develop behind a Dane Jackson. Doesn't feel good to me.
Yeah, I do. Again, fans would freak out if there's any scenario where Dane Jackson is starting week 1. But the only scenario I could see it makes sense is a Revel or a Morrison where they're slow playing their availability and readiness. They can't play a lot in camp yet. And then they can't get the reps to start, but then they ease in as the season goes. They're still the long-term starter for the team. So that one is one where we would never hear the end of it, where he's only not starting because McDermott hates rookies. But
correct. I still don't think it would be Dane either. I think it would probably be Rasul or something like that would come in if they didn't
feel like they were ready to start. They would probably go sign a Rasul or a Gilmore or whoever.
Yeah, okay. But Amos feels like the perfect Thomas and Amos in that first round to me feel like the right fits for the Bills defense, where like a Revel feels like fans wish casting what they would like the Bills to have.
Harrison might be wish casting too.
A little bit. Yes.
Just because I watched him run his 40 in person. That dude can fly.
He's like, an athlete.
That dude can fly.
Yeah.
So that kind of scenario, I think people just want that. Obviously we watch the crossers in that championship game and everybody getting lost in mesh. And I'd like a guy who could run stride for stride with those guys as they come across the field. And I think those are the ones where it's interesting to me, where it's starting to feel like the way the tiers are set up, unless we get, if Grant falls, that's an easy pick. If Nolan falls, it's probably an easy pick. And depending on how they feel about, obviously I love Derek Harmon. I don't care that he's probably more pass rusher than he is run defender. I would want that. He's the kind of disruptive guy that I want to figure it out. I want to figure out how to make that work. We'll figure out the rest. But it probably makes more sense for a Thomas and an Amos. And then the tier that you talked about, are they reaches, now becomes easier, where you take the later 4th round pick and you move up from 56 to 40. And then you take Tyleik Williams or Darius Alexander, because now you're not having to worry about were they worth the 30th pick. You now use some of we have 7 day 3 pick or day 3 picks, use a 4th, a 5th, and a 6th, and move up from 62 up to 39 or whatever. Like, just use some of the ammo to move up and get the guy that's there. And you walk away with Amos and Tyleik Williams, Amos and Darius Alexander, or Thomas and one of those guys, and you set that up right. And then you can still come back later and take Isaiah Alexander and pair him with it.
For me,
Well, I love you. It's what a caring partner does. And pair that with a CJ West or with a JJ Pegas or whatever it is. I want badly to double dip here, and I'm not predicting that we need another Kyer Elam, Christian Benford situation, but we saw the benefits of when you double dip at Gregory Rousseau and Carlos Basham, or whether you double dip at Kyer Elam and Christian Benford. You only need to hit once. And does it suck that we wasted a first round pick and a second round pick in those two scenarios? Sure. But we ended up with a $20 million a year player in each of those two scenarios. I'm good. We got the $20 million a year player in the draft. There's a whole lot of teams who wish they got a $20 million a year player out of those combos. Give me 2 stabs at both of those positions. I want 2 defensive tackles. I want 2 cornerbacks. We'll figure out the rest later on. Just give me multiple stabs at those spots.
Yeah. And honestly, I do think, just based on, obviously, none of these boards are right. Even if you go to the consensus big board, there's going to be errors in it in terms of where people are projecting guys to go or how high NFL teams are on these guys. But based on the information we have, it makes so much sense for the Bills to find the one corner they want the most and attack that at 30, take those 2 picks, behind it, because there's a huge gap for me in Bills fits at cornerback once you get past Trey Amos, really. I do like Morrison. I think he's also kind of in that. But again, I guess if you were going to take, this type of guy that's going to be a red shirt, I just don't love the idea early. I'm willing to red shirt a guy because he slipped and fell a little bit
with
later
our second pick, our 3rd pick of the draft. I can live with throwing that away, or not throwing that away, but putting that on layaway.
Yes, but I would love to these guys that right now are projected in the 120s, 130s that I think could actually come in and start at that cornerback 2 spot. It wouldn't always be pretty, but they're guys that could fit into exactly what the Bills defense is. And I see them as fits are Isaiah Alexander, are Noel Williams, are a Kobe Bryant from Kansas. These are guys you can wait on where you can attack corner early, really aggressively go after multiple types of defensive tackles because it's such a deep draft, and then come back to corner later. I want to give as many of these assets to the defense, and then get some speedy wide receiver later on if you want. If you're one of those guys that's we need to add speed to the wide receiver room, there's plenty of that, I think, later on that you can still add. And we're talking about wide receiver 5. It's going to be a project sort of no matter who we get into that room. But I do think when you kind of attack the draft like that, you are going to miss out on edge. You are going to miss out on safety if those are priorities for you. But for me, the Bills have this glaring need, and the more things that I can throw at it to hit, because we know Greg Rousseau is a really solid player. I think he's on the verge of being a great player. That took 3 years, right? Some of these guys, even in this late first round, might not hit right away. It doesn't mean they'll be a bust or whatever, but the more options, to your point, you have at it, the more chances we have at success early on, in my opinion.
Yeah. Great call by Kevin. Another double dip that worked out with Spencer Brown and Tommy Doyle. Again, you just need one of them. And Kevin, no, this is actually Montreal behind me. Montreal. But Jason here with a great call. So the reason we're almost at 100,000 subscribers is the killer work that the film room is doing. 4 straight weeks, they've knocked this out of the park. They had Michael Hoyt, they had Terrell Bernard, they had Gregory Rousseau, and now came back with maybe the single funniest cover 1 episode we've ever had with Alec Anderson. Just a killer show. Eric is crushing it. We've had 4 straight Bills players on the film room. Make sure you check out all of those episodes. And if you're listening right now and you haven't hit that subscribe button, help us out. Just press that button. Just go over there, press it right now. Press the like button while you're there. Just help us out. That really goes a long ways to help us with all the stuff that we're working on here.
Yep.
All right. So with our final section here, I wanted to do our Here to Help segment for our friends over at William Mattar Law Offices. Again, you know the slogan, hurt in a car, call William Mattar, 844-444-4444. And we got somehow the contract for Christian Benford that I already thought was a huge value and a very team-friendly deal. The best value of all the extensions, which is saying something, because Khalil Shakir and Gregory Rousseau were also really good values.
Yeah. This was the one I think we all thought would be break the bank the most as we started to see cornerback contracts
Yeah, it was going to be the most painful. I had it at like 4 years, 82 million. The guys over at Spot Track had it at 4 years, 89 million. Daniel Salib, who again, if you guys aren't following him, Daniel's one of the best up and coming salary cap guys that's out there, does some really, really good work. He had it at 4 years, 86 million. He ended up coming back later and joking with me in DMs after the Gregory Rousseau deal. Is like, yeah, I can't believe that deal. Watch Bean lock this up at like 4 years, 76 million. And he was joking about what a example of a crazy team friendly deal was. Well, the announcement comes out and it's 4 years, 76 million. And then today the details come out and it's actually 4 years and 69 million. They got him at like 17.25 million a year. It makes him the 20th highest paid cornerback in the NFL. 20th. He's not the 20th best cornerback in the NFL. I can tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
The 20th highest paid guy, when you include the final year of his rookie year deal that we locked it in now, we have Christian Benford locked up for the next 5 seasons at $73 million a year. That's less than $15 million a season. We have 5 years of Christian Benford at $14.75 million. It's just absolutely unbelievable value.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really fantastic to be able to have it set up that way. It's awesome.
Where I didn't get a chance to, I was actually super busy today when I saw that those things were coming out about the details. Where are the potential outs in this deal? Because I know a lot of people have concerns about the concussions and the injury history with Benford. I'm much less concerned at that contract. But where are some of his outs, if you know, in terms of, say, he suffers more injuries or whatever, and the concerns that people have do come to light?
So as I was looking at it, I think the way that it's set up, technically, you're going to have. So they gave him a $7.5 million signing bonus now. So that prorates over the next 5 years at $1.5 million a year.
Sure.
That's not going to be a deal breaker.
Yeah.
Next year, there's a guaranteed option bonus that was another like 12.2 million, something like that prorates over those next 5 years. So I think realistically, you're going to get to where the next 2 years, you're absolutely locked in. There's nothing you could do. In theory, in 2027, there may be some chances that you could walk away and still eat a pretty rough
Sure.
dead cap hit, but it's not unreasonable because it jumps to a $14.5 million salary that's not guaranteed right now. So as some of those things come together and you have a chance, I think that, okay, so there is a guarantee in the 2026 season that will trigger a 2027 guarantee. So that I'm glad I looked this up while we were talking. So realistically, the first 2 years of the extension, so this year, 2026 and 2027, we're pretty much locked in. Those 3 years, where there's no realistic scenario that we're going to get out of that, and that's going to pay him $8.6 million in cash this year, 15.5 next year, 15.5 the year after. Now the cap,
maybe he can buy James Cook's house.
he definitely can afford it now. The cap hit's going to be $2.6 million this year, $7.4 million next year. So real cheap the next 2 years, very manageable. It jumps to 19.4 next year, but that's where it's going to come into play. So in 2027, let's say the next 2 years go really, really well. If the next 2 years go really, really well, in 2027, he's going to be the number one restructure candidate, where you're going to say, oh, let's drop his cap hit, where that $14.5 million salary, you're going to be able to take that and divide that up into the 5 years that you can prorate it. You're going to be able to kick like $11.5 million of that into the future and drop that down $11.5 million to like probably a $7 or $8 million cap hit instead of a 19.4, and have that cap space. Or you're going to get to that 2027 year, the last 2 years, let's say, God forbid, there's more concussion issues, or his not only some concussion issues, but his play takes a step back and it ends up not being the player that we hoped he would be. Well, then we're going to say, all right, this 2027 year, we're going to leave it as is. We're not going to mess around with any of that. And then in 2028, even though we obviously hope that isn't the case, you could have a $3 million dead cap hit and $17 million in savings, where you could just walk away and be like, hey, you want to know what? We appreciate everything, but we're going to cut ties. And it ends up being one, like everything, these deals that Bean does, it's 2 years and then we'll see. Yeah. So if you count this year, it's 3 years and then we'll see. But out of the new money, the 4-year extension, it's really 2 years for $31 million, and then we'll see.
Gotcha. Like it.
So.
He's done some work, man. Every smart person that I've talked to has just raved about Brandon Beane's ability to get these guys on team-friendly deals early. And it's not the most fun stuff. Like, we didn't have a lot of fun this offseason, but man, it's going to pay dividends here going through these next few years as that Super Bowl window is wide open.
Yeah, and I mean, again, we're homers. I like to be objective and analytical when I can, but I'm a homer, so I obviously have rose-colored glasses with plenty of things. But when I see people like Daniel Salib is not a Bills fan, Tej, that we've had on the show before, Ben Solak, those are not Bills fans. Right. Ben Solak has the Bills as the best offseason so far of all 32 teams. He ranked the Bills first. It was because of not only adding, Bosa and Hoyt and Palmer were little pieces of it, but it was because of how incredibly team-friendly the extensions were. Daniel Salib said the Bills negotiating staff is by far the savviest of all 32 teams. He doesn't understand how they keep getting these unbelievable values on these extensions. The same thing from Tej. Like, those are some of the, like, financially, some of the more analytically savvy and smartest guys around the NFL. So when you hear guys like that, they have no affiliation to the team. They're not Bills fans. They have no reason to blow smoke for anything like that. When those guys are telling you that Brandon Beane's getting the best deals and the best values of any extensions going around the league, that really carries a lot of water with me and is exciting to hear about.
I think I can't prove it, but I think drafting the right kind of guys that fit the culture, which was made fun of so much when, McDermott first came here and was trying to establish that stuff. I do think getting culture fits and guys that understand, like, I think Christian Benford's a great example of him being a fit in this defense that fits perfectly has allowed him to be one of the top corners in the league and being in a place that you are competing for Super Bowls consistently. And the way they talk about this team in the locker room and the going to dinners and, like, everybody that comes in through here that has played at other places or talks to players that play at other places, it isn't the same. And so if you have guys that those are the things that matter to them, I do think you're willing to take a little less to be in the right place because you're still making a lot of money. You're still in your legacy matters here. And so I think finding those guys that fit the culture pays dividends in these ways as well.
So if you take a couple other examples of teams who are also retaining really talented players
and are good,
but are very, very good, but are waiting until the last minute, which are Cincinnati and Dallas. Mm-hmm. Cincinnati and Dallas are also retaining.
Well, Dallas isn't good.
Very. But they have with Dak and CD, and they're probably about to with Micah Hyde if they don't keep pissing them off. But if you take the examples of what they've done in their negotiating style, waiting to the last minute, stretching it out, and what they've ended up paying, being conservative. Like, I'm not even trying to stretch out every possible dollar of what each of these guys could have possibly made in the best case scenario. Just using some of the existing projections that other reputable sources projected them at. The 5 extensions that Brandon Beane locked up next year and the year after, by my estimation, created an extra $25 million in spending money. Of extra cap space to go out and get an entire splurge player or 2 really, really good high-end players just because we were proactive and locked those guys up, and Josh Allen not holding their feet to the fire of every possible dollar he could get. Sure. Those 5 players together, I think that's an additional $25 million in value of available spending money the next 2 seasons that they have available to them here. And that stuff goes a long way. So I talked about it before. Locking these guys up does not create a ceiling. Locking these guys up raises the floor. Locking these guys up means that the 5 straight division titles, that kind of thing, might continue. Locking these guys up means that 5 straight seasons of 11 plus wins, I think that kind of thing is going to continue. What it now creates is when you raise that floor, if you happen to hit on a draft class where when you have 10 picks and you can move around a little bit, let's say he ends up making 7 or 8 of the picks, but he's able to target his guys and move up for them. And out of those 7 or 8 picks, 3 or 4 of them really hit and end up being very nice players. And maybe one of them even ends up being like a big grand slam type hit. That now, when you add that to locking in a now retained extended core over this next stretch, now you can hit a really special run where you can do some really cool things. So again, we have no idea how the draft's going to go. We have no idea if he's going to hit on it to that degree, but it's now created a window where we don't have anything to worry about from that floor standpoint. We've retained that kind of talent. And if God forbid he hits on one of these drafts, it really pulls in some special talent, you could go on a really, really special run.
Yeah. This is team building 101, man. This is everything. During those drought years, this is everything I wanted the Bills to be, what the Packers were for years, what the Steelers were for years.
How many fun players did we have to root for on other teams because we couldn't keep Jarius Byrd and Paul Posluszny and Marshawn Lynch, and they over and over and over and over again, all the guys that we knew we weren't going to keep them because as soon as they got good enough, they wouldn't want to stay here, or that if they wanted to stay, it was going to cost us $1 bajillion because they would rather take less money to go elsewhere. Well, now guys are taking discounts to stay in Buffalo. Did you ever think that would be the case?
Yeah, no. And honestly, you look at Cincy. I don't know if you saw that report of Trey Hendrickson where they talked about like, well, he needs to like know his value. And it's like, oh no.
I wasn't going to go down that path, but since you opened up that box, the daughter's owner, the owner's daughter made a comment that they've been negotiating with Trey Hendrickson directly, not with his agent, and that maybe Trey needs to learn to be happy with less money.
Yeah,
like that is just a wild thing to say in a negotiation. Like, you don't say that out loud. Like, that's just not you. That's the quiet part.
That's stuff for like us fans to say. Yeah.
Like, you don't say that out loud in a negotiation. That is one of the most absurd, crazy things I've ever heard an owner say out loud. Bengals. It's so wild.
It's such a Bengals thing.
Oh my God.
They almost got over the hump of that, like they're so cheap with the T. Higgins thing, but then that came out. It's like, oh no, they still are.
Maybe he needs to learn to be happy with less.
Yeah.
Okay. Best of luck with that. I wish you all the best with that. Anyways. Now that we're here, any final thoughts for the people?
No, not really. If anybody has any requests, if you're in the Discord channel or if you're on social media or something of draft prospects that you want me to look into, I'm kind of running through my list here right now. So anybody that has crushes or people that they want me to look into, hit me up. This is the time of year where I want to dive into that stuff, but I'm excited to get you into mock season here as we get through this draft.
Still haven't done one
because it's coming quick though, man. I flipped the calendar the other day and Masters
is April. It's draft time now.
Masters is going to blow by here. School vacation for kids is going to go by here, and then it's going to be draft before you know it. So we're going to be mocking. We're going to be doing all this stuff. It's here. It's in full swing. So I'm excited for it. This is the time of year now that I like the crazy people that are doing it during the season, or even the ones that are like in February that just can't get enough mocks. That's not me, but this is the time of year where I do start to get excited for it.
100%. We try to go with the pace of the season. We stay in the playoffs while it's playoff times. Then we talk about retaining our own players. Then we talk about free agency. And then we talk about the draft. We still talk about the draft for an entire month before the draft comes. And just like in college, where I didn't do any of the real work during the class, but I still cram before the test and still got a great grade on all the tests, I'm going to do the same thing at draft time. I'm just going to cram and cheat off of other people's work and then get ready for the test.
But all of our answers will be wrong. We will not get grades on this.
Sadly, you're right. I was way at cramming for tests than I am at guessing who the hell the Bills are going to pick. But regardless, I'll just wait until the Bills pick them, and then I'll study those guys.
Yeah.
All right, man. Thank you very much to all the fans. As Chris pointed out here, if you want to play in a subscriber fantasy football league, we have new ones popping off all the time. I see invites all the time in our Discord channel. Come on over, hang out there with us. All kinds of great stuff. If you want to see previews of the film rooms that Eric is pulling in together in these awesome shows. He gives crazy clips and awesome things in there, breakdowns of the prospects that we're diving into, talking about the different prospects that are there. A lot of guys in the chat here tonight, they're with us all the time. Come on over, check it out, cover1.net/OnePass. Sign up to join us at OnePass. You get access to the Discord, awesome shirts from 26 Shirts, all kinds of other cool things. Make sure to check it out. Huge thank you to our friends over at William Mattar Law Offices. Great partners to work with there. Again, you know the slogan, hurt in a car, call William Mattar, 844-444-4444. Great call by RJ. I genuinely hope Destin is good, and this
I just reached out to him.
A power outage and not anything actually concerning or scary. He's an awesome guy. Really hope he's safe and him and his family are okay there. And I know we talked pre-show that Kentucky, Indiana corridor there, Southern Ohio. There's some
Tennessee,
really nasty stuff going on.
Yeah.
So hope everybody listening here was safe and with their families doing okay. So appreciate it very much.
And I hope you travel safe.
Travel safe. I got one more day of meetings tomorrow, and then I fly back with my family here tomorrow night, and I get a couple days to stay home for a little bit here. So.
Awesome. Hope you enjoy it.
Yeah. Appreciate you guys. Thank you for everybody in the chat. Thank you for awesome producer Chris Kepner. On behalf of Aaron Quinn, I'm Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.